December 1944. Deep inside a fortified bunker in the Ardennes forest, German Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt sits across from his intelligence officers. On the table between them are thick dossiers, each containing everything German intelligence has collected on Allied commanders. Photographs, intercepted communications, battlefield analyses, psychological profiles. Von Rundstedt picks up one file and reads aloud. His officers listen in silence. These are not propaganda assessments. These are the private, classified opinions of Germany's top military minds about the generals trying to destroy them. And what they wrote was sometimes more honest than what the Allies said about each other. Here is what you are about to discover. The German High Command kept meticulous records on Allied generals, ranking them, analyzing their tactics, identifying their weaknesses. Some they feared, some they dismissed, some they respected deeply. And their assessments, now declassified and studied by historians, reveal a perspective on World War II leadership that challenges everything you think you know. Let me show you what the enemy really thought. The German military intelligence system, the Abwehr, and later, the Wehrmacht's own intelligence branches, treated the Allied command structure like a science. Every battle was studied, every decision dissected, every general's psychological profile updated. They knew who drank too much, who was cautious, who was reckless, and who could be baited into mistakes. And they used this information to predict Allied moves, exploit weaknesses, and occasionally to win battles they should have lost. But their opinions were not always what you would expect. The general America loved most was not the one Germans feared most. The commander the British press celebrated was someone German officers privately mocked. And the leader the Allies put in supreme command was seen by German analysts as something far more dangerous than a battlefield tactician. Let us start at the bottom and work our way up. The general's German high command considered the least threatening, the most predictable, the easiest to counter, and then we will climb the ladder to the men who terrified them. At the bottom of the German assessment list sits a name that might surprise you. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, Monty, the hero of El Alamein, the man who stopped Rommel in North Africa, the architect of the D-Day ground campaign. To the British public and much of the Allied press, Montgomery was a brilliant, meticulous commander. To German intelligence, he was something else entirely: predictable. Here is what German General Gunther Blumentritt wrote in his post-war assessment. Based on wartime intelligence files, Montgomery was exceedingly cautious. He would never attack until he had overwhelming superiority in men, tanks, artillery, and air support. Once we understood this, we knew we could predict his movements with remarkable accuracy. He was methodical to a fault. There was no flexibility, no improvisation. He fought by the book, and we had read the book. German commanders noticed a pattern. Montgomery would spend weeks, sometimes months, building up supplies and reinforcements before launching an attack. During this build-up, German forces could reposition, reinforce weak points, or even withdraw to better defensive positions. The delay gave them time, and in war, time is often more valuable than tanks. The assessment gets harsher. Captured German documents from the Western Front describe Montgomery as overly concerned with his public image and unwilling to take risks that might result in high casualties and damage his reputation. One German intelligence report from late 1944 noted that Montgomery's caution had become so predictable that German staff officers could accurately forecast the timing and location of his offensives simply by monitoring Allied supply movements. But here's the twist. The Germans also noted that Montgomery almost never lost. His caution meant his attacks, when they finally came, were usually successful. He did not lose battles because he never fought battles he could not win. To the German mind, this was not brilliance. It was the absence of risk. And in their view, truly great generals had to be willing to gamble. The most damning German assessment of Montgomery came after Operation Market Garden in September 1944. The plan to drop paratroopers behind German lines, seize bridges across the Rhine, and end the war by Christmas. It was Montgomery's idea. It was bold. It was risky. It was uncharacteristic. And it was a disaster. German Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding forces in the Netherlands, reportedly said after the battle, "Montgomery tried to be daring for once, and it nearly destroyed him. He should have stayed cautious. That is what he is good at." The failed operation, which cost the Allies over 17,000 casualties and accomplished almost nothing, seemed to confirm the German view. Montgomery was a competent defensive commander and a cautious offensive planner. But he was not, in their eyes, a great general. Moving up the list, we come to American General Omar Bradley, the GI's general, the quiet, methodical commander of the United States First Army, and later, the 12th Army Group. Bradley was respected by his men, trusted by Eisenhower, and considered a steady, reliable leader. German intelligence saw him differently. They saw him as competent, but uninspired. A manager, not a warrior. Here's what German General Fritz Bayerlein, who faced Bradley's forces in Normandy, said in his post-war interrogation. Bradley was solid, professional. He made few mistakes, but he also made few brilliant moves. He was the kind of general who would win a war of attrition because he had more men and more supplies, not because he outthought you. German assessments noted that Bradley rarely took the initiative. He responded to German moves rather than forcing Germans to respond to his curse. During the Normandy breakout, it was Patton's Third Army that drove deep into France. Bradley's First Army advanced methodically, securing territory and consolidating gains. Important work, necessary work, but not the kind of aggressive initiative-seizing command that Germans feared. One captured German intelligence report from August 1944 described Bradley as the opposite of Patton. Where Patton is fire, Bradley is water. Steady, methodical, and risk-averse. If the American strategy is to simply overwhelm us with material superiority, Bradley is the perfect executor. If they need to outmaneuver us, he is not the man. But the Germans also respected Bradley for one critical reason. He did not make big mistakes. During the Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944, when German forces smashed through the Ardennes and threatened to split the Allied front, Bradley remained calm. He repositioned forces, reinforced critical points, and trusted his subordinates. The German offensive failed, and part of the reason was Bradley's steady hand. German commanders noted this in their reports. Bradley does not panic. He does not overreact. He is the anchor that keeps the American line stable. Remove him, and chaos might follow. But he will never be the spear that drives through our defenses. Now we move into the middle tier. Generals the Germans considered genuinely dangerous. The first is a name casual history fans might not know, but German intelligence knew well. British General William Slim, commander of the 14th Army in Burma. Slim fought in a theater far from Europe, in the jungles of Southeast Asia, against the Japanese. But German intelligence monitored his performance closely because he demonstrated something they feared: adaptability. Slim took over British forces in Burma after a series of humiliating defeats. The Japanese had driven the British out of Burma in 1942, inflicting one of the worst retreats in British military history. Slim rebuilt the shattered army, retrained them for jungle warfare, and then did something remarkable. He outfought the Japanese at their own game. German intelligence reports on Slim, shared between Axis powers, noted his ability to learn from defeat. One assessment read, "Slim does not repeat mistakes. He analyzes failure, adapts tactics, and implements changes quickly." This is the mark of a thinking general, far more dangerous than a general who simply follows doctrine. During the battles of Imphal and Kohima in 1944, Slim used mobility, air supply, and aggressive counterattacks to destroy two Japanese armies. The Germans, reading intelligence reports from their Japanese allies, recognized Slim's methods: speed, flexibility, and willingness to take calculated risks. One German staff officer reportedly wrote, "If Slim were in Europe, he would be a significant problem. He fights like we used to fight in 1940, but Slim was in Burma, not Europe." So our German high command respected him. They did not fear him the way they feared the next general on the list. George S. Patton, the most aggressive, controversial, and charismatic American general of the war. To the American public, Patton was a hero, a warrior poet, a profane, fearless leader who drove his tanks deeper and faster than anyone thought possible. To German intelligence, he was all of that and more. He was the one Allied general who fought like a German. Here is what German General Fritz von Broich said after being captured by Patton's Third Army. "We had been told the Americans were soft, that they lacked the warrior spirit. Then we faced Patton. He was not soft. His troops moved with speed and aggression. His tactics were bold, sometimes reckless but effective. He understood what we understood, that in war momentum is everything." German intelligence files on Patton are thick. They tracked his career from North Africa to Sicily to France. They noted his strengths and his weaknesses, and they came to a conclusion that would have pleased Patton enormously. He was the Allied general most similar to a German panzer commander. One German intelligence assessment from 1944 described Patton's command style. Patton relies on speed, surprise, and concentrated force. He does not wait for supply lines to catch up. He does not consolidate. He drives forward, exploiting breakthroughs, forcing the enemy to react. This is blitzkrieg. This is how we fought in 1940, and it is devastatingly effective when executed with sufficient force. But the Germans also identified Patton's weakness. He was predictable in his aggression. If you knew Patton was coming, you knew he would attack and was coming. You knew he would go for the bold move, the deep penetration, the exploitation of any gap. And if you could bait him into overextending, you could cut him off. During the Battle of the Bulge, General Patton did something that stunned both the Allies and the Germans. He disengaged his entire Third Army from an offensive in the Saar region, pivoted 90 degrees north, and attacked the southern flank of the German Bulge in less than 48 hours. It was a logistical and tactical miracle, moving an entire army in winter across icy roads and launching a coordinated attack within days. German General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army, reportedly said, "When we heard Patton was coming, we knew the offensive was doomed. Not because of his tactics, but because of his speed. He moved faster than we could reposition, faster than we could reinforce. He gave us no time to react." But here is the paradox. While German field commanders feared Patton, German high command did not rate him as the most dangerous Allied general. Because Patton, for all his brilliance, had a fatal flaw. He was emotional, impulsive. He could be baited. He could be provoked. And he often alienated his own superiors, limiting his influence. The most famous example is the slapping incident. In August 1943, Patton slapped 2 shell-shocked soldiers in Sicily, calling them cowards. The scandal nearly ended his career. He was relieved of command and sidelined for months. German intelligence noted this in their reports. One assessment read, "Patton is brilliant, but unstable. His superiors do not fully trust him. This limits his strategic influence. He is a tactical weapon, not a strategic mind." So if Patton was not the most dangerous Allied general in German eyes, who was? Let me show you the top tier. The generals German high command genuinely feared. First is Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the man who defended Moscow, broke the siege of Leningrad, crushed the Germans at Stalingrad, won the largest tank battle in history at Kursk, and led the final assault on Berlin. Zhukov was not an Allied general in the Western sense, but German intelligence absolutely tracked him, and they feared him more than any Western commander. Here is what German Field Marshal Erich von Manstein wrote about Zhukov. He was ruthless, both with his own men and with us. He would sacrifice entire armies to achieve an objective. But his brutality was not mindless. It was calculated. He understood that the Eastern Front was a war of annihilation, and he fought accordingly. We could kill 100,000 of his men in a single battle, and he would have 200,000 more the next week. and he would learn from the defeat. His offensives became more coordinated, more devastating, more unstoppable. German intelligence reports on Zhukov describe him as the most dangerous Soviet commander and a general who combines tactical aggression with strategic patience. During the Battle of Kursk in July 1943, Zhukov built a defense in depth, with multiple lines of fortifications, anti-tank guns, minefields, and reserves. When the German offensive stalled, he launched a massive counter-offensive that drove German forces back hundreds of miles. One German staff officer wrote in his diary, "Fighting Zhukov is like fighting a machine. He does not care about casualties. He does not care about elegance. He cares only about results. And he gets them." But Zhukov commanded on the Eastern Front, far from the Western Allies. The German generals in the West faced a different set of commanders. And at the top of the Western list, there is one name that appears again and again in German intelligence assessments. Not as the best battlefield tactician, not as the most aggressive fighter, but as the most dangerous strategic mind, Dwight D. Eisenhower. This surprises people. Eisenhower is often remembered as a political general, a diplomat, a coordinator, not a battlefield commander like Patton or a tactical genius like Rommel. But that is exactly why the Germans feared him. Here is what German General Siegfried Westphal wrote in his post-war analysis. Eisenhower was not a great tactician. He did not need to be. His strength was in holding the alliance together, managing enormous logistical operations, and making strategic decisions that consistently put us at a disadvantage. He understood that the war would be won not by brilliant battlefield maneuvers, but by relentless, coordinated pressure across multiple fronts. And he executed that strategy perfectly. German intelligence noted that Eisenhower had a rare ability. He could manage massive multinational coalitions without letting ego, nationalism, or personal ambition destroy unity. The Germans had hoped that tensions between American, British, and French commanders would create opportunities, delays, disagreements, paralysis. But Eisenhower kept the alliance moving forward. One captured German intelligence assessment from 1944 reads, "Eisenhower's greatest weapon is not his tanks or his aircraft. It is his ability to coordinate Allied operations so that we face simultaneous pressure from multiple directions. We cannot reinforce one sector without weakening another. This is strategic suffocation, and it is working." German commanders noticed something else about Eisenhower. He learned. After the slow, grinding battles in Normandy, he adjusted. After the failure of Market Garden, he adapted. After the shock of the Bulge, he reorganized. He did not repeat mistakes. He did not cling to failed strategies. He evolved. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the overall German commander in the West, reportedly said after the war, "If the first had to face one Allied general with equal resources, I would choose Montgomery or Bradley. They were predictable. If the first had to face Patton, I would respect his aggression but trust that he would overextend." But Eisenhower was different. He did not need to be brilliant on the battlefield. He simply needed to keep the machine running, and the machine was unstoppable. But there is one more general we need to discuss. A man who does not appear on many greatest generals lists, but whom German intelligence considered exceptionally dangerous in a very specific context. Soviet Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky, the architect of Operation Bagration, the 1944 Soviet offensive that destroyed German Army Group Center and killed or captured over 450,000 German soldiers in 5 weeks. It was the single largest German defeat of the entire war. German intelligence reports on Rokossovsky describe him as a master of deception and coordination. During the planning for Bagration, Rokossovsky used maskirovka, the Soviet art of military deception, to convince the Germans that the main Soviet offensive would come in Ukraine, far to the south. The Germans reinforced Ukraine, and then Rokossovsky struck in Belarus with overwhelming force. One German officer who survived Bagration wrote, "We had no warning. One moment our front was quiet. The next we were being hit by artillery barrages that lasted hours. Then came the tanks, then the infantry. We were surrounded, cut off, annihilated. It was more devastating than Stalingrad because it happened so fast. German assessments of Rokossovsky noted his ability to coordinate massive operations involving millions of men, thousands of tanks, and tens of thousands of artillery pieces. One intelligence report read, "Rokossovsky does not improvise. He plans meticulously. And when he strikes, the force is so overwhelming that resistance becomes futile." But again, Rokossovsky fought on the Eastern Front. The Germans in the West had a different concern. Not which Allied general was the best fighter, but which Allied general was the hottest to counter. And the answer, according to multiple German sources, was not a field commander at all. It was Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder, Eisenhower's deputy, and the architect of Allied air superiority. German generals on the Western Front did not fear Patton's tanks or Montgomery's artillery as much as they feared the aircraft overhead. By 1944, the Luftwaffe had been destroyed. Allied aircraft controlled the skies. And that changed everything. German Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, who commanded in Italy, wrote after the war, "The greatest advantage the Allies had was not their soldiers or their tanks. It was their air power. We could not move during the day without being attacked. Our supply lines were bombed. Our reinforcements were strafed. Our headquarters were targeted." Tedder understood that controlling the air meant controlling the battlefield. And he was right. German intelligence assessments of Tedder describe him as the invisible hand that makes Allied ground operations possible. One report noted, "Without Tedder's air support, Patton's offensives would stall. Montgomery's attacks would be repelled. Bradley's logistics would collapse. Tedder is the foundation upon which Allied success is built. Let me bring this all together." The German High Command ranked Allied generals not by charisma or public reputation, but by how much they threatened German strategic objectives. At the bottom were cautious, predictable commanders like Montgomery and Bradley, competent but manageable. In the middle were aggressive, adaptable fighters like Patton and Slim, dangerous but fallible. At the top were strategic minds like Eisenhower and Zhukov, not necessarily brilliant tacticians, but leaders who understood that modern war is won by logistics, coordination, and relentless pressure. And the general they feared most on the Western Front was not a ground commander at all. It was the man who made sure Allied armies never had to fight without air superiority. But here's the final twist. The German assessments, for all their insight, missed something critical. They evaluated Allied generals as individuals. They looked for weaknesses, predictability, patterns, but they failed to understand that the Allied system was designed so that no single general had to be brilliant. Eisenhower coordinated. Patton attacked. Bradley held. Montgomery planned. Tedder controlled the air. The system was redundant, flexible, and overwhelming. One German general, reflecting after the war, said it best. "We were looking for the great Allied general we could outsmart. We did not realize that the Allies did not need one. They had a system, and the system crushed us." So here is my question for you. Knowing what German intelligence really thought, who do you consider the most effective Allied general of World War II? Was it the aggressive fighter like Patton? The cautious planner like Montgomery? The strategic coordinator like Eisenhower? Or the Soviet hammer like Zhukov? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I want to see this debated. And if this changed how you see World War II leadership, hit that like button and subscribe for more history that reveals what the enemy really thought. Thanks for watching.